There are moments that change your life forever, though you rarely recognize them when they happen. For Sofia Martinez, that moment came on a rain-soaked highway at rush hour when a black Mercedes nearly turned her
You look
into a
so
headline.
beautiful.
I feel so
The
safe
late
with
January
you.
storm had transformed Interstate 95 into a nightmare of hydroplaning vehicles and blinding sheets of water. Sofia knelt in the soaked grass beside her Honda Civic, wrestling with a tire iron that refused to cooperate. Her graphic design portfolio presentation had gone poorly that morning. The tech startup founder had called her work too ethnic for their minimalist brand vision. And now this. The flat tire felt like the universe's final commentary on her worthless day. She didn't hear the Mercedes lose control. The screech of locked brakes cut through the rain's percussion, and when Sofia looked up, the world became slow motion. Black luxury sedans spinning like a top on wet asphalt, headlights sweeping across her vision in dizzying arcs, the horrible mathematics of velocity and trajectory pointing directly at her kneeling body. Sofia threw herself backward, landing hard in mud that soaked instantly through her jeans. The Mercedes stopped 3 feet from her Civic's bumper, engine hissing steam, front end crumpled against the guardrail. For several heartbeats, she couldn't move. Rain hammered her face. Her lungs forgot how to pull air. The space where she'd been kneeling moments before looked like a grave. The driver's door opened. A man stumbled out, tall and disoriented, expensive suit already ruined by the downpour. He saw Sofia sprawled in the grass and broke into a run. His hands found her shoulders, steadying, checking. The words came out ragged. "Are you hurt? God, please tell me you're not hurt." Sofia stared up at him. Brown hair plastered to his forehead, blue eyes wide with terror that had nothing to do with his demolished car. A face that belonged on magazine covers, not accident scenes. Something about his genuine panic, the way his hands shook as they hovered over her arms, afraid to cause more damage, broke through her shock. She threw herself into his arms. The embrace was pure instinct, adrenaline seeking human contact, the desperate need to confirm she was alive. He tensed for half a second, surprised. Then his arms came around her and held tight. Sofia buried her face against his chest and felt sobs she didn't know were coming. He smelled like expensive cologne fighting a losing battle with rain and fear sweat. The fabric of his suit jacket cost more than her monthly rent. His heartbeat thundered against her ear, as wild as her own. The words came out muffled against his shoulder. "Thank you for not killing me." His laugh was shaky, relieved. One hand came up to cradle the back of her head, protective. Warmth radiated through soaked clothes. For a moment, they were just two people who'd survived something terrible, holding on to each other while traffic roared past and rain turned the world into watercolor. When Sofia finally pulled back, she saw his face properly. Defined jaw, eyes that actually looked at her, not through her. An expression of such genuine relief that something in her chest went tight. He extended his hand, formal despite the chaos. Alexander Kensington. She shook it, her hand small in his. "Sofia Martinez, and you just gave me the worst scare of my life." His smile transformed his face, warm and self-deprecating. "Can I make it up to you? There's a Starbucks at the next exit. We can wait for tow trucks somewhere dry." Sofia looked at her pathetic Honda with its flat tire, then at his Mercedes that would need a flatbed. Logic suggested she should decline, call AAA, handle this alone like she handled everything. But her hands were still shaking, and his offer felt less like charity and more like shared trauma bonding. She heard herself say yes. 20 minutes later, they occupied a corner table at Starbucks, both dripping puddles onto linoleum. Alexander had insisted on buying vanilla latte for her, black coffee for him. and now they sat across from each other like survivors of something more dramatic than a near accident. The fluorescent lights made everything feel surreal. Sophia wrapped her hands around the cup's warmth and studied the man who'd almost ended her life. He asked about her work. Not the polite small-talk version, actual curiosity. Sophia pulled up her portfolio on her phone, braced for another too ethnic critique. Instead, Alexander leaned in, scrolling slowly, asking why she chose certain color palettes, what inspired her typography choices. He noticed the way she integrated cultural elements into modern design, called it sophisticated rather than niche. Something unlocked in Sophia's chest. She found herself explaining her vision, how Miami's Cuban heritage deserved to be celebrated in contemporary spaces, how tradition and innovation could dance together. Alexander listened like her words mattered, asked follow-up questions that proved he was actually processing, not just being polite. When she turned the conversation toward him, he deflected. Real estate was all he'd offer about his work. But he opened up about other things, how he'd fallen off his bike at 8 trying to impress a girl, earned the scar on his chin, and a lifetime of wariness around showing off. His genuine love for old movies, the kind Sophia's father played on Sunday afternoons. The way he'd drive to Key West just to watch sunrise over the Atlantic when Miami felt suffocating. Sophia shared her irrational butterfly phobia, the result of a traumatic elementary school field trip involving a butterfly garden and an overly enthusiastic lepidopterist. Alexander laughed, not at her but with her, understanding that childhood fears didn't require logic to persist. 2 hours evaporated. The tow truck driver called, her tire was fixed, his Mercedes needed serious work. Reality intruded on their bubble. Alexander walked her to her car, insisted on paying the repair bill over her protests. His argument was simple. Insurance would cover it, and he'd sleep better knowing he'd made some small amends for nearly killing her. Standing beside her Honda, rain finally tapering to mist, Sophia felt the moment stretching. Alexander's hand came up, almost touched her arm, then dropped. His voice went uncertain in a way that made him more attractive, not less. "Can I call you? Maybe dinner this week?" Sophia's heart did something complicated. She barely knew this man. He was clearly wealthy, probably had a girlfriend, definitely lived in a world of country clubs and vacation homes. But the way he'd held her on that roadside, the genuine interest in her work, the 2 hours of conversation that felt like minutes, she wanted more of that. She gave him her number, watched him save it carefully, like it mattered, drove home with a smile she couldn't quite suppress, thinking maybe the universe's commentary on her day wasn't entirely negative after all. That night, she texted Gabriella, "You won't believe what happened today." That same night, Alexander sat in his Key Biscayne penthouse, staring at Sophia's contact information. He drafted 17 different opening texts, deleted them all, settled on something simple. His thumb hovered over send. His phone rang. Mother's contact photo filled the screen. Patricia Bradford in pearls, the portrait of old money expectations. Alexander almost didn't answer, then thought better of starting that particular war. Patricia's voice carried its usual blend of warmth and agenda. Small talk about his day, questions about the accident, somehow she already knew, which meant Edward's assistant had seen the tow truck report. Then the conversational pivot Alexander had been dreading. "The Martinez girl, the one we've been telling you about. Her mother and I are arranging lunch this week. You'll finally meet her." Alexander's stomach dropped. The Martinez alliance. His parents had been pushing it for 6 months. A business merger disguised as romance, Bradford Properties expanding into the Martinez family's restaurant empire. He'd been dodging, delaying, finding excuses. Now Patricia's tone suggested his evasion time had expired. He almost mentioned Sophia then, almost explained he'd met someone, a graphic designer with fierce independence and a laugh that made his chest hurt in good ways. But the words stuck, because once Patricia knew, the machine would start analyzing, evaluating, judging. Sophia would become another variable in the Bradford Empire's calculations. So Alexander said nothing, agreed to the lunch, ended the call, deleted the unsent text to Sophia. Told himself he was being smart, not cowardly. He had no idea Sophia Martinez, the woman who'd crashed into his life on a rain-soaked highway, was about to crash into it again from an entirely different direction. Sophia woke to her phone's aggressive buzzing. 17 missed calls. Her screen lit with Rosa's contact photo, her mother in the kitchen of the original Martinez family kitchen location, wooden spoon raised like a weapon of culinary justice. The text message was brief and terrifying. Emergency family meeting, now. Mija, it's important. Sunday morning meetings in the Martinez household meant either catastrophic news or life-altering announcements. Sophia dragged herself into jeans and a sweater, skipped makeup, drove to Coral Gables with dread building in her chest. The family mansion, a sprawling Mediterranean revival her father had purchased during better financial years, buzzed with relatives. Aunts, uncles, cousins she barely recognized, all wearing their serious occasion faces. Rosa met her at the door with urgent hands, steering her toward the living room where Miguel waited. Her father's weathered face carried the expression he wore when choosing between pride and practicality. That expression had accompanied every major Martinez family decision for 3 decades. Rosa wasted no time. She gestured Sophia toward the ornate sofa, a wedding gift from Abuela Maria, reupholstered twice, carrying the weight of family history in its cushions. The words came out in rapid-fire Spanish, then English when Rosa caught herself. Mija, we've always wanted the best for you. Always. Sophia's stomach performed an unpleasant flip. She recognized this preamble, the same one that had preceded Gabriella's suggested courtship with Luis, which had worked out well enough. They were happy, had baby Isabella, seemed content. But Gabriella had wanted that life. Sophia very much did not. Miguel cleared his throat, the sound of a man about to say something he'd rehearsed. The Bradford family has been friends with us for many years, since I first opened the restaurant in Little Havana, when Edward helped me navigate commercial real estate. Sophia's dread intensified. She knew the Bradford name. Everyone in Miami did. Bradford Properties owned half the valuable parcels in South Florida, operated with a kind of quiet power that didn't need to advertise. Rosa leaned forward, eyes bright with maternal hope. Their son, James Alexander Bradford. He's a good man, Mija. Successful, handsome, from an excellent family. He goes by James. The name registered. Then really registered. Sophia's brain performed rapid calculations, arrived at an impossible conclusion, rejected it, recalculated with the same horrifying result. James Alexander Bradford. Alexander Kensington. The same man who'd nearly run her over yesterday. The same man who'd bought her coffee and listened to her ramble about design philosophy. The same man whose number sat in her phone under Alexander, Coffee Guy. Almost killed me. Her voice came out strangled. What did you just say? Miguel mistook her tone for resistance. He launched into explanation mode, the careful speech of a businessman making his pitch. The Bradfords and Martinezes had been discussing this arrangement for 6 months. It made sense on multiple levels: business, social, cultural. The families had history, respect, aligned values. Catherine Bradford and Rosa had become genuine friends during the preliminary discussions. Sophia heard the words from a great distance. 6 months. They'd been planning her life for half a year without a single conversation. packaging her like a restaurant franchise ready for acquisition. Rosa continued, oblivious to Sophia's growing horror.
It's not like we're forcing anything, mija. We just want you to meet him, get to know him, see if there's potential.
The rage came then, hot and clarifying. Sophia stood abruptly. Several relatives jumped. Her voice cut through the room's expectant murmur. You're trying to sell me, like I'm part of a business deal. Miguel's face tightened. Sophia, that's not— How long? She turned on her mother.
How long have you been planning my marriage without telling me?
Rosa's hands fluttered, defensive. We were waiting for the right time to discuss. Discuss? Discuss! Sophia heard her voice rising, couldn't stop it. You don't discuss after you've already decided. You're telling me my life is already arranged. That's not a discussion. That's a transaction. Miguel stood, trying for parental authority. The business is struggling, Sophia. The Orlando expansion didn't work.
We're carrying significant debt. The Bradford connection would help stabilize.
The truth landed like a slap. They weren't just arranging her marriage, they needed it. The restaurants her father had built from nothing, the empire he'd constructed through brutal hours and sacrifice, was failing. And Sophia was the proposed solution. Abuela Maria's voice cut through the chaos, reedy but firm. The family matriarch sat in her wheelchair near the window, backlit by Miami sunshine that made her white hair glow. 83 years of Cuban stubbornness radiated from her small frame. In my time, arranged marriages were normal, expected. Your abuelo and I met twice before our wedding. 52 years we had together. 52 good years. Sophia spun toward her grandmother. This isn't 1950, Abuela. Women aren't property anymore. Abuela Maria's smile was knowing, frustrating.
Property? No, mija.
But family is still family. Sometimes love grows from commitment, not before it. Sophia opened her mouth to argue. The doorbell chimed, cutting off whatever furious response she'd been constructing. Rosa's face transformed, guilt and excitement warring for dominance. She moved toward the foyer with the determination of a woman executing a plan. Sophia's heart stopped. She knew with absolute certainty who stood on the other side of that door.
Rosa's voice carried false brightness.
Oh, wonderful! The Bradfords are here. Sophia, come meet James. Every muscle in Sophia's body locked. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process the magnitude of the disaster unfolding. Footsteps in the foyer. Multiple voices offering greetings.
Then they entered the living room. Edward Bradford, distinguished silver hair and tailored suit. Patricia Bradford, elegant as a society magazine spread. An older woman Sophia didn't recognize, sharp-eyed and regal. And behind them, looking as horrified as Sophia felt, was Alexander. Their eyes met across the room. Sophia watched his face cycle through emotions: confusion, recognition, understanding, betrayal. His jaw tightened. Something cold flickered in those blue eyes that had been so warm yesterday. The space between them crackled with a tension everyone else misread as anticipation. Patricia Bradford's delighted voice shattered the moment. Oh, how wonderful! You two have already met. The older woman, Catherine Bradford, Sophia's brain supplied, clapped her hands together. This is even better than we hoped. The universe clearly wants this union. Edward Bradford stepped forward, all business deal confidence. His voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to successful negotiations. James, meet your bride-to-be, Sophia Martinez. Sophia watched Alexander's, James's, face transform. The warmth she'd seen yesterday, the genuine interest, the connection that had felt so real, all of it hardened into something unreadable. He looked at her like she was a stranger. Worse,
like she was a threat. His voice came out tight, controlled. "We need to talk. Privately." Rosa beamed, missing the danger entirely. "Of course. Use the garden. Get to know each other better." Sophia followed James through the house on numb legs. He moved like a man heading toward execution, spine rigid, hands clenched. They emerged into the garden her father had designed himself. Royal palms and bird of paradise surrounding a tiled fountain that gurgled cheerfully, oblivious to the emotional carnage about to unfold. The moment they cleared the doorway, James turned on her. The transformation was complete. Yesterday's warmth had frozen into accusation. "You knew." Not a question, a conviction. Sophia's confusion gave way to defensive anger. "What?" His laugh was bitter, ugly. "Yesterday, the accident. You knew exactly who I was." The accusation was so absurd that Sophia actually stepped back. "Are you insane? I had no idea until this morning." James's expression said he didn't believe her. His voice dropped, dangerously quiet. "Right. What a convenient coincidence. My family's been trying to set me up with you for 6 months. And suddenly you appear in my path, literally throwing yourself at me." The words hit like physical blows. Sophia's hands started shaking. "You think I staged a near-death experience? You think I planned for you to almost kill me? The flat tire, the vulnerability, the way you made me feel like some kind of hero." James paced, building his case like a prosecutor. "That conversation at Starbucks, you played it perfectly, asked all the right questions, showed me your work, made yourself interesting, relatable." Sophia's rage built with each accusation. "I didn't—" The tears, the way you clung to me, then the casual mention of your number, making me think I was pursuing you. His smile was cruel. "It was all an audition, wasn't it? See if you could hook me before the official introduction." Something in Sophia snapped. The fear, the betrayal, the sheer arrogance of this man who thought every woman on earth was scheming to trap him, it all crystallized into action. Her hand moved before conscious thought caught up. The slap echoed across the garden like a gunshot. James's head snapped sideways. A perfect red handprint bloomed on his cheek. Birds fled the nearby palms, startled by the crack of skin on skin. Silence. James stared at her, hand rising slowly to touch his face. His eyes were wide with genuine shock. Sophia's voice came out low, shaking with fury. "How dare you? How dare you?" She stepped closer, finger jabbing at his chest. "You arrogant, privileged, self-absorbed piece of work. You think every woman on the planet is scheming to trap you? You think your money and your name make you such a prize that I'd risk my life for the chance to meet you?" James's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "I was changing a tire. My tire. On my car. Because I handle my own problems. Then you came spinning out of control and almost killed me. Almost killed me." Each word punctuated with another jab to his chest. And in a moment of human weakness, terrified and grateful to be alive, I hugged a stranger. That's it. That's the whole conspiracy. His shock was giving way to confusion. "But, want to know what I thought this morning when my mother told me about this arranged marriage?" Sophia's laugh was harsh. "I was furious. Furious! Because I'm 28 years old and I don't need my parents picking my husband like he's a business merger. I thought I was meeting some entitled rich boy I'd never seen before." She spun away, then back, too angry to stand still. I had no idea that entitled rich boy was you, and I definitely had no idea you'd immediately accuse me of being a manipulative liar." James lowered his hand from his cheek. His voice came out uncertain. You really didn't know?" "Of course I didn't know." Sophia's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. "You think I enjoy this? Having my life arranged without my input? Being told who to marry like my choices don't matter?" She watched realization dawn across his face, the certainty crumbling, the awful understanding that he'd been completely, catastrophically wrong. "I don't want this marriage," Sophia continued, voice breaking. "I don't care if you're the richest man in Florida. You're also the most conceited jerk I've ever met, and I'd rather eat glass than spend another minute pretending to care about you." They stood there, breathing hard, the fountain's cheerful burbling a mockery of their emotional devastation. James's face had gone through shock into something that might have been shame. He started to speak, stopped, tried again. "Wait, you don't want this either?" Sophia's laugh was bitter. "Want it? My parents just told me this morning. Told me, not asked. I thought I'd have to meet a stranger and pretend to be interested. Finding out that stranger is you just made it worse." The silence stretched, both of them processing. Inside the house, their family's laughter drifted through open windows, completely unaware of the disaster blooming in the garden. James ran a hand through his hair, the gesture of a man whose world had just inverted. "This is insane." "Welcome to the Martinez family," Sophia said dryly, "where your personal choices are optional suggestions." Something flickered across James's face that might have been recognition. "The Bradfords aren't much better. My father's been pushing this business alliance for months. I've been dodging, delaying. Looks like I ran out of time." Sophia studied him, really looked at him. The man who'd held her so gently yesterday, who'd listened to her talk about design philosophy like it mattered, was the same man she was apparently supposed to marry. The same man who'd just accused her of elaborate manipulation. The cognitive dissonance made her head hurt. "So, what do we do now?" James's jaw set. "I'm not marrying someone who slaps me on our first official meeting." "Good," Sophia crossed her arms, "because I'm not marrying someone who thinks I'm a scheming liar." They glared at each other across the fountain. The moment felt simultaneously absurd and tragic. Yesterday they'd had potential. Today they had wreckage. James broke first. His voice came out quieter, almost vulnerable. "I'm sorry about the accusations. I was wrong." Sophia wanted to stay angry. Anger felt safer than the complicated mess of emotions churning in her chest. But his apology sounded genuine, and she understood, in a distant way, how his mind had made those terrible connections. "Yes," she said finally. "You were." They heard Patricia's laugh from inside, followed by Rose's responding giggle. The sound of families bonding, planning, assuming. Both Sophia and James flinched. James looked toward the house, then back at Sophia. Something shifted in his expression. "Maybe we can help each other." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "How?" "They're not going to let this go easily. Either of them." James's voice took on a calculating edge. "Our families want this alliance. They'll push, pressure, manipulate. We could fight them separately or... Sophia wasn't sure she wanted to hear this. "Or we could fight them together. Present a united front. Make them think we're considering it while we figure out how to actually get out of this mess." The suggestion was tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Sophia's instinct screamed to run, handle this alone, maintain independence.
But she'd seen her mother's face. Rosa wasn't going to accept a simple no. And Miguel's desperation about the restaurants meant this arrangement carried weight beyond matchmaking. I need to think about it. James nodded. Fair. But, Sophia? She waited. I really am sorry. About yesterday and today. I was wrong about your motives. I was wrong about a lot of things. Sophia studied his face, saw genuine regret there beneath the privilege and assumptions. Maybe, under different circumstances, they could have been something. But these circumstances were a disaster, and trust once shattered didn't easily rebuild. She left him in the garden, walked back into the house where both families waited with expectant faces, smiled through the rest of the afternoon, made polite conversation, avoided James's eyes, and all the while her mind calculated angles, options, escape routes from the cage their families had constructed. That night, alone in her small apartment, Sophia stared at her phone. James had sent one text. If you want to talk about my suggestion, call me. No pressure. She should delete it. Should tell her parents tomorrow that this wasn't happening. Should take back control of her own life. Instead, she saved the message. Told herself it was just keeping options open. Tried to ignore the voice in her head that whispered she was making a terrible mistake. 3 days passed. Sophia threw herself into design work, avoiding Rosa's calls, ignoring the group chat where various Martinez relatives debated wedding venues. She almost convinced herself she could weather this through pure avoidance. Then James showed up at her favorite coffee shop. Not the Starbucks from their first meeting, the small Cuban cafe in Little Havana where Sophia went for real coffee and empanadas. He looked out of place among the elderly Cuban men playing dominoes, but he'd clearly done reconnaissance to find her. She considered leaving. Pride demanded it, but curiosity won. Sophia nodded toward the empty chair at her table. James sat, ordered café con leche in terrible Spanish that made the barista wince, waited until they had privacy. I know you hate me, he started. Hate is strong. Despise works better. His lips twitched despite the situation. Fair. But we're both stuck in this mess. Sophia stirred her coffee, saying nothing. My grandmother is flying in from Boston tomorrow. Catherine Bradford. You met her briefly. She's been planning this wedding since I was 12. If she finds out I'm backing out, she'll make my life a living hell. Trust fund, inheritance, everything. She controls it all until I'm 35. And I should care about your inheritance, why? James met her eyes. Because your family will do the same to you. I saw how your parents looked at you, how your whole family was watching. They think this marriage is your path to security. They're not going to let you walk away easily. He wasn't wrong. Sophia had seen the calculation in Miguel's eyes, the hope in Rosa's smile. They believed this Bradford alliance would solve problems, open doors, provide safety their daughter couldn't find alone. James leaned forward. 1 month. Pretend to be the perfect engaged couple for Catherine's visit. She goes back to Boston satisfied. Our families calm down. Then we figure out how to gradually break this off without World War III. Sophia laughed, sharp and humorless. You want to pay me to fake an engagement. I want to pay you to help us both survive our families. James pulled out his phone, showed her a banking app. $50,000. Consider it compensation for your time and trouble. The number hit Sophia like cold water. $50,000 would erase her student loans, cover rent for a year, provide seed money for her own design studio. Every practical bone in her body screamed to take the offer, but her pride, her hard-won independence, her father's voice echoing that dignity comes from what you earn, all of it rebelled against accepting money from a man she barely knew. This is insane. You're insane. James didn't deny it.
Catherine makes the Spanish Inquisition look like a tea party. Trust me, you'll earn every penny. Sophia studied him, looking past the privilege and assumptions to the desperation underneath. He was trapped too, in a different kind of cage. Maybe they could help each other. Maybe this disaster could serve a purpose. 1 month? 1 month. Then we're done. Sophia's practical side warred with her pride. $50,000. 1 month of pretending, then freedom. It was a devil's bargain, but she'd made worse choices for less money. I want a contract. Terms in writing. James actually smiled, impressed. You don't trust easily. Rich men who think they can buy anything? No, I don't. They shook hands across the cafe table. The elderly domino players watched with interest, probably assuming romance. If they only knew. Partners in crime, James said. Partners in surviving our insane families, Sophia corrected. She had no idea she'd just agreed to the most complicated month of her life, or that 1 month would become much, much longer. 2 days later, Sophia stood in the foyer of the Bradford estate in Key Biscayne, wearing a dress borrowed from Gabriella that didn't quite fit right. The mansion was everything she'd expected. Old money elegance, water views, the kind of casual wealth that didn't need to advertise. Catherine Bradford waited in the formal living room. The matriarch was smaller than Sophia remembered, but her presence filled the space. 76 years old, impeccably dressed, eyes that missed nothing. She looked Sophia up and down with an appraiser's precision. So you're the girl who's finally tamed my grandson. Sophia found herself responding honestly. I wouldn't say tamed, more like domesticated? Catherine's laugh was unexpected, genuine. I like her already, James. She's got spine. Much better than that vapid Whitmore girl you brought home last Christmas. Grandmother, James warned, but his voice carried affection. Dinner was formal, multiple courses, crystal stemware, the kind of silverware that required specialized knowledge. Sophia navigated it carefully, hyper-aware of being evaluated. Catherine asked probing questions between courses, each one designed to reveal character. What do you see in my grandson besides his trust fund? Sophia could have deflected, played coy. Instead, she met Catherine's sharp gaze directly. Mrs. Bradford, with all due respect, I didn't pursue James. Our families brought us together. But what I see in him now is someone who makes me laugh when I want to cry. Someone who's trying to be better than his circumstances. And someone who, despite a terrible first impression, might actually be worth knowing. The honesty surprised everyone, including Sophia. Catherine set down her wineglass slowly. You're honest. That's rare in this world. Most women who sit at this table tell me what I want to hear. She turned to James. This one's different. Don't mess it up. After dinner, Catherine requested the proposal story. Sophia's mind went blank. She looked at James, silently panicking. He started to speak, but Sophia interrupted, the lie forming even as she told it. It was raining. I was stranded with a flat tire, feeling completely helpless. She wove truth and fiction together, describing their actual meeting, but reframing it. He appeared like someone who shows up when everything falls apart, and I knew, in that moment, that's the kind of person I wanted in my life. Catherine's eyes grew suspiciously bright. She dabbed them with an embroidered handkerchief. That's the most romantic thing I've heard in decades. James, don't mess this up. Driving home later, the silence in James's Mercedes felt weighted. Sophia stared out at passing lights, processing what had just happened. They'd survived the first test. The lie had felt disturbingly natural. James broke the quiet. You're a good actress. Sophia kept watching the lights. Who says I was acting? She felt his glance, sharp and surprised. The car suddenly felt smaller. Neither of them spoke the rest of the drive, but something had shifted. The line between performance and reality was already blurring, and they'd only just begun. When James dropped her off, Sophia sat in her apartment for a long time, staring at nothing. She'd signed up for 1 month of pretending, but the way her heart had jumped when James smiled at Catherine's approval, the ease with which they'd presented a unified front, the dangerous comfort of his presence, all of it whispered warnings she wasn't ready to hear. Outside, Miami rain began to fall. Sophia watched it streak her windows and thought about collisions, about plans gone wrong, about the terrifying space between what you intend and what actually happens. She had no idea the worst was yet to come.
Catherine Bradford's 2-week visit became an immersion course in performing intimacy. Sunday morning found Sophia and James at St. Patrick's Cathedral, sitting between their families in a pew worn smooth by generations of worshippers. Father Tom O'Brien's homily touched on commitment, on building foundations strong enough to weather storms. Sophia felt the weight of deception settle over her shoulders like a lead shawl. She wasn't particularly devout anymore. College and independence had softened her childhood Catholicism into something more cultural than spiritual. But kneeling beside James, hands folded in automatic prayer, she felt the old rituals reaching for her. Beside her, James appeared genuinely moved by the liturgy. His voice joined the responses with unexpected confidence, someone who actually attended Mass rather than treating it as a social obligation. After the service, Father Tom caught them in the narthex. His weathered face radiated the kind of warmth that made confession feel less like judgment and more like conversation. He'd known both families for years, had blessed the original Martinez family kitchen location, had baptized James when the Bradfords still maintained their Miami residence full-time. "I've been praying for this union," he told them, one hand on James's shoulder, the other on Sophia's. "Two good families coming together. It's a blessing." Guilt twisted in Sophia's stomach. She managed a smile that felt like tissue paper over a wound. James squeezed her hand. Reassurance or warning, she couldn't tell. They stood there receiving Father Tom's blessing while their families beamed nearby, and Sophia wondered what kind of penance applied to lying to a priest about love. The afternoon brought a different kind of torture. Catherine insisted on wedding dress shopping at an exclusive Coral Gables boutique, where appointments required 3 months' notice, and the cheapest gown cost more than Sophia's car. The owner greeted Catherine by name, ushered them into a private suite with champagne and finger sandwiches that probably cost more per bite than Sophia's typical lunch. Rosa had come along, tears already threatening her carefully applied mascara. Gabriella served as maid of honor by default, baby Isabella asleep in her carrier. Patricia Bradford completed the entourage, elegant and enthusiastic in equal measure. Sophia felt like a doll being prepared for display. The first 3 dresses were beautiful but wrong. Too much lace, too little structure, designed for someone who wanted to be a princess rather than a partner. Then the consultant brought out something different, ivory silk that caught light like water, simple lines that suggested rather than announced, a neckline that balanced elegance and sensuality without tipping into either extreme. Sophia stepped into it with the consultant's help. The silk whispered against her skin, cool and perfect. When she turned toward the mirror, someone else looked back. Not Sophia Martinez, struggling graphic designer with student debt and rent anxiety, someone who belonged in cathedral aisles and formal photographs, someone who could actually be marrying James Bradford. Rosa started crying. Catherine dabbed her eyes with that ever-present handkerchief. Even practical Gabriella looked misty.
The consultant called for James. Standard practice, she explained. The groom's reaction often sealed the decision. Sophia's stomach clenched. This was too real, too close to an actual future she wasn't supposed to want. James entered the suite, saw her, and stopped walking. His throat worked. Color rose in his face. For several heartbeats, he just stared while their mothers and grandmother watched with satisfied expressions. His voice came out rough. "You're beautiful." Not "the dress is beautiful," not "you look nice." Simple, direct, aimed at her rather than the gown. Sophia felt heat climb her neck, spread across her chest. Their eyes met in the mirror's reflection, and something electric passed between them that had nothing to do with performance. Catherine made the decision for them. "We'll take it. Have it altered and delivered to Sophia's address." Sophia wanted to protest. This felt too permanent, too committed. But her voice wouldn't work. James hadn't looked away from her reflection. The moment stretched, dangerous and compelling, until the consultant ushered Sophia back to the changing room. Later, alone in the dressing area, Sophia stared at herself in her regular clothes. Jeans, simple blouse, the armor of her actual life. The woman in the wedding dress had been a stranger, beautiful, confident, ready for a future that didn't exist. Her phone buzzed. Text from James. That wasn't acting. Sophia deleted it without responding. Some truths were too dangerous to acknowledge. The week accelerated into a blur of staged domesticity. Dinner at the Bradford estate Tuesday, where James surprised everyone by helping Catherine in the kitchen. Dinner at the Martinez mansion Thursday, where Sophia watched James attempt to cook ropa vieja under Miguel's patient instruction. Her father was teaching him, actually investing time and knowledge, treating James like family rather than business opportunity. James proved surprisingly capable. He listened to Miguel's directions, asked thoughtful questions about technique rather than just following recipes. Something about watching him dice peppers alongside her father, both men's hands moving in the comfortable rhythm of shared work, made Sophia's chest ache with unexpected longing. Friday brought extended family invasion, Martinez cousins, aunts, uncles, all wanting to meet the Bradford boy. James navigated it with more grace than Sophia expected. He held baby Isabella with natural comfort, made genuine conversation with Tio Roberto about baseball, helped Abuela Maria navigate her wheelchair to the garden when she wanted fresh air. None of it felt performed. He was just being kind. Late Friday evening, after the families had finally dispersed, Sophia's phone rang. James's name on the screen. She almost didn't answer. They'd spent enough time together for 1 week. But curiosity won. "I need to know something." His voice carried uncertainty that made him more human, less Bradford Empire. "When you're with me, are you always acting?" Sophia sat on her apartment balcony, Miami spread below in lights and distance. "I don't know anymore." The honesty surprised her. James was quiet for a moment, processing. "Me neither." They talked for 2 hours, not about the arrangement or their families, about real things. James confessed his actual dreams, teaching elementary school, working with kids who still believed the world was fundamentally good. His father had mocked it, called it wasted potential, insisted Bradford men ran empires, not classrooms. Sophia shared her own frustrations, how every client meeting felt like code switching, how she downplayed her Cuban heritage to appeal to mainstream sensibilities, how exhausting it was to constantly translate herself for spaces that didn't want translation, just assimilation. They discovered unexpected alignment, both feeling trapped in family expectations, both performing versions of themselves to keep peace, both wondering what life might look like if they chose their own paths. When they finally hung up, Sophia felt something dangerous settling in her chest. This wasn't part of the plan. Liking James, actually enjoying his company, seeing past privilege to the person underneath. All of it complicated the clean exit strategy she'd imagined. The engagement photo shoot Saturday brought the complication into sharp focus. The photographer Catherine had hired, a renowned artist who typically worked with celebrities, set up at South Beach during golden hour. Sophia wore a flowing sundress borrowed from Gabriella's pre-pregnancy wardrobe. James appeared in casual elegance, the kind that cost money to look effortless. The photographer wanted spontaneity. She directed them to run along the water's edge, James chasing Sophia through surf while sunset painted everything amber and rose. Sophia ran, feeling foolish and free simultaneously. James caught her easily, spun her around, both of them breathless and laughing for real. The photographer's camera clicked rapid fire. She kept calling encouragement about their chemistry, how natural they looked together. Sophia wanted to explain it was all performance, but her racing pulse and the warmth spreading through her chest from James's hands on her waist told a different story. They moved to the rocks for dramatic silhouettes. James sat on driftwood, Sophia between his legs, leaning back against his chest. His arms came around her naturally. The Atlantic whispered against shore. The photographer faded into background noise. James's voice was quiet against her ear. "Tell me something true." Sophia watched waves roll in, repeating their ancient pattern. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of how easy this is. How right it feels." She paused, the words catching. "Of how much I'm going to miss this when it's over." His arms tightened fractionally. What if it doesn't have to be over? Before Sophia could parse that, the photographer called time. The sun had set. They'd captured enough magic. Sophia stood on legs that felt uncertain, wondering when the line between pretending and believing had dissolved entirely. Valentine's Day arrived on a Tuesday, 2 weeks into Catherine's visit. James appeared at Sophia's apartment door at 6, holding roses that weren't red. He'd remembered her mentioning once that red roses felt cliché. These were coral pink, unusual and perfect. He'd made reservations not at some trendy fusion place or exclusive rooftop venue, but at a small Cuban restaurant in Little Havana that Sophia's grandmother used to visit. The kind of place that hadn't changed decor since 1987, where the owner still hand-wrote the menu daily, where the food tasted like someone's actual kitchen rather than a chef's interpretation. Sophia's throat tightened as they entered. "How did you find this place?" "Asked your father what mattered to you." James pulled out her chair, old-fashioned and genuine. "He said you valued authenticity over performance. Figured that applied to restaurants, too." The meal unfolded with easy conversation. They'd crossed some threshold, from strangers performing engagement to people who actually knew each other. James had learned her coffee order, her design philosophy, her irrational fears. Sophia knew about his childhood bike accident, his love for nature documentaries, his secret enjoyment of terrible action movies he'd never admit to Catherine. After dinner, they walked to Bayfront Park. Miami skyline glittered across dark water. Couples dotted the paths, Valentine's Day romance in careful staging. Sophia and James found a bench away from crowds, sat with comfortable space between them. James turned toward her, expression serious. "I need to tell you something." Sophia's pulse quickened. "What?" "I'm not pretending anymore." His voice carried weight, certainty. "Haven't been for a while now." The words hung between them, reshaping reality. Sophia's breath caught. She should deflect, remind him about their arrangement, maintain boundaries. Instead, she heard herself whisper his name. He leaned closer, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. His eyes searched hers,
asking permission. Sophia closed the distance. The kiss started soft, questioning. Then James's other hand found her waist and pulled her closer, and soft became urgent. Sophia's fingers tangled in his hair, and she kissed him back with weeks of denied wanting. He tasted like café con leche and possibility. His hands were careful even as passion built, always asking, never demanding. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. "This changes things," he managed. "Everything," Sophia agreed. They sat there while Miami's lights glittered in different witness. Two people who'd started as strangers became conspirators and had just crossed into territory neither could map. The next morning brought panic. Sophia woke tangled in sheets, James's kiss still burning on her lips, and felt the full weight of what she'd done. This wasn't supposed to be real. 1 month of pretending, then freedom. Instead, she'd let herself fall, and the landing was going to hurt. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Miguel. She dialed back, expecting wedding planning questions, got disaster instead. Miguel's voice was strained, aged by stress. "Mija, I need you to come to the restaurant, not the house, the flagship location. Now." Sophia, dressed in yesterday's clothes, drove to Little Havana through morning traffic with dread building in her chest. Martinez Family Kitchen's original location sat on a corner lot Miguel had purchased 30 years ago with money saved from working 3 jobs. The building represented everything her father had built from nothing. She found him in the office, paperwork spread across his desk like evidence of a crime. He looked older than she'd ever seen him. Gray had deepened in his hair. Lines had carved deeper around his eyes. This was Miguel stripped of pride, facing something he couldn't fix with hard work alone. The Orlando expansion failed. His voice was flat, facts without emotion. "We lost $400,000. The bank is calling the loans. If we can't pay $200,000 immediately, we lose everything. All 3 locations." Sophia felt the floor drop away. 3 restaurants. Her father's legacy. The source of pride he'd built over decades of 18-hour days and sacrificed weekends. Gone because of a gamble that hadn't paid off. "When?" Her voice came from somewhere distant. 2 weeks. They've been patient, but patience has limits. Sophia's mind raced through calculations. Her savings wouldn't make a dent. Her student loans meant banks wouldn't extend her credit. 200,000 might as well be 2 million. Understanding crashed over her like cold water. This was why her parents had pushed the Bradford marriage so desperately. Not just social ambition, survival. The alliance wasn't about climbing social ladders. It was about not losing everything Miguel had built. "Is this why you wanted me to marry James?" Miguel's face crumpled. He aged another decade in front of her. "We would never force you, Mija. But we hoped, with the Bradford connection, maybe." Sophia felt sick. Her family had been suffering while she'd been falling for James Bradford, playing pretend engagement, kissing him in parks like some romantic movie. Meanwhile, her father was drowning. "I'll figure something out," she promised, though she had no idea how. "Don't ask the Bradfords." Miguel's voice turned sharp. "I have my pride, Sophia. I built this with my own hands. I won't become a charity case." Pride. The Martinez family inheritance, more valuable and more destructive than money. Sophia understood it bone deep because she carried the same burden. She left the restaurant feeling like she was moving through water. $200,000. 2 weeks. Impossible mathematics. She could ask James,
The money would mean nothing to him, pocket change from his trust fund, but asking would make her exactly what he'd first accused her of being. Gold digger, schemer, someone who'd kissed him while calculating his net worth. Sophia decided to handle it herself. She took on 3 new design clients that afternoon, promising unrealistic timelines, worked 16-hour days, barely slept. James noticed her distraction, asked what was wrong. She lied, said she was just busy, watched concern flicker across his face, and felt guilt layer over exhaustion. 1 week later, Catherine hosted a charity gala at the Biltmore Hotel, black tie fundraiser for youth education programs, the kind of event where Miami's wealthy convinced themselves generosity justified excess. Sophia wore a gown borrowed from Gabriella, felt like an imposter among women whose jewelry cost more than cars. James looked devastating in his tuxedo, comfortable in this world in ways Sophia would never be. He introduced her to business partners, society figures, people whose names appeared in Forbes and tabloids. Sophia smiled, made appropriate conversation, felt the gap between their worlds yawn wider with every interaction. Then she walked in. Blonde perfection in a gown that probably had a name and pedigree. She moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who belonged, who'd been born into crystal chandeliers and champagne fountains. She walked directly to James, kissed his cheek with casual intimacy, and Sophia's stomach dropped. "James, darling, it's been too long." James tensed. "Lauren, what are you doing here?" The woman, Lauren, smiled with polished warmth. "Catherine invited me. Didn't she mention?" Sophia watched them, reading body language and history. This wasn't a stranger. This was someone who knew James, who had claim to casual affection, who belonged in his orbit. Lauren turned, registering Sophia's presence with the kind of visual assessment wealthy women perfected. Not quite dismissive, but definitely measuring. "You must be Sophia. I've heard so much about you." James's discomfort was palpable. He made introductions with visible reluctance. "Lauren Whitmore, old family friend." Sophia heard the careful editing, the things left unsaid. Lauren suggested champagne, steered Sophia toward the bar with predatory grace. Once they had distance from James, her smile sharpened. "I'm sure James has told you about us." Sophia's hand tightened on her glass. "He mentioned an ex." Lauren's laugh was crystalline, practiced. "Oh, more than that. We were engaged 2 years ago." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Engaged. James had been engaged to this perfect blonde woman who fit his world like a custom glove. He'd broken it off, but that detail felt less important than the fact it had existed at all. "He said he wasn't ready for marriage." Lauren sipped champagne, watching Sophia's reaction. Funny how quickly not ready changes when the right circumstances appear. She gestured vaguely at the gala, the guests, the context. "I spent 2 years in Europe, finding myself, getting over him. Now I'm back, and I'm not making the same mistake twice." The threat was delicate but unmistakable. Sophia looked across the room where James stood talking to an older couple, clearly looking for her. He caught her eye, started to move toward them. Lauren followed her gaze. "I'm the right choice, Sophia. You know it. I know it. Our families have been friends for generations. I understand his world, his responsibilities, his expectations. You're—" She paused, the insult more effective for being unspoken. "Temporary." James appeared before Sophia could respond. His hand found the small of her back, protective and possessive. "Lauren, I think your date is looking for you." Lauren smiled sweetly. "I came alone, but I'm at the Ritz if you want to catch up properly. Suite 412. She glided away, leaving tension crackling in her wake.
James looked at Sophia with concern sharp enough to cut. What did she say?
Nothing important.
But it was important. Lauren represented everything Sophia wasn't. Right family, right education, right social position. She fit James's life like a puzzle piece, while Sophia was busy trying to jam herself into a space that didn't accommodate her shape. The gala blurred after that. Sophia smiled through the rest of the evening, danced when required, played her part. But Lauren's assessment echoed through her thoughts. Temporary. The word carried truth Sophia had been avoiding. She and James existed in a bubble, but bubbles inevitably burst. The next afternoon, Catherine invited Sophia to lunch, just the two of them at an elegant Coral Gables bistro, where everyone knew Catherine's name and preferences. Sophia arrived nervous, uncertain what this private audience meant. Catherine ordered for both of them with casual authority, then settled back to study Sophia with those unnervingly sharp eyes. I need to be honest with you, dear. Sophia's pulse quickened. Here it came. Catherine had seen through their performance, was about to expose the arrangement, maybe withdraw support. I know how this engagement started. Sophia's breath caught. She waited for the axe to fall. Catherine's smile was knowing, not unkind. I'm old, not foolish. I saw the truth that first dinner. The way you both looked trapped. The careful performance. Sophia couldn't speak. Every defense, every lie dried up in her throat. But, Catherine continued, I also saw what happened after. The way you look at each other when you think no one's watching. The way James softens around you. The way you challenge him to be better. She leaned forward, intensity replacing amusement. Do you love my grandson? The question was a blade, surgical and precise. Sophia could lie, should lie, maintain the fiction. Instead, truth spilled out. Yes, but I don't know if that's enough. Catherine nodded like Sophia had passed some test. Love is rarely enough on its own. It needs respect, trust, partnership. She paused. There's something you should know. James has been meeting with your father privately. Alarm bells rang in Sophia's mind. What kind of meetings? I'm not entirely certain, but I've seen paperwork, bank documents, transfer forms. Catherine's expression suggested she was trying to help, thought she was offering useful information. Whatever he's planning, he hasn't told you. The restaurant suddenly felt too warm. Sophia's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. James meeting with Miguel. Bank documents. The timing aligned too perfectly with the restaurant crisis. Catherine continued, oblivious to the panic building in Sophia's chest. James wants to take care of you. That's how Bradford men show love. They provide. They protect. They solve problems. Sophia heard, he's trying to buy your family. He's treating this like a business transaction. Everything you feared is happening. She excused herself early, claiming headache. Drove straight to James's penthouse, used the key he'd given her the week before in a gesture of trust that now felt like evidence of manipulation. His desk sat in the corner of his home office, overlooking Miami's glittering sprawl. Sophia shouldn't look. Knew she shouldn't. But Catherine's words had planted seeds of doubt that demanded answers. The folder was right there, not even hidden. Martinez Family Kitchen printed on the tab in James's neat handwriting. Inside, loan purchase agreements, bank transfers, legal documents showing James Bradford had bought Miguel's restaurant debt from the bank. $340,000 transferred through a holding company James controlled. Payment schedules. Restructuring plans. Everything documented with clinical precision. Also, expansion proposals, plans for Martinez restaurant locations in Bradford Properties developments. Financial projections showing how the Martinez brand could scale with proper funding and real estate support. Sophia's hands shook. The papers blurred. Everything snapped into focus with horrible clarity. James had been manipulating her family's financial situation while pretending to fall for Sophia. The romance, the vulnerability, the confessions about his dreams, all of it strategy, a way to secure her compliance while he executed his business plan. She'd been played. Completely, professionally played. And she'd made it easy by falling in love with him. Her phone showed a text from James. "Dinner tonight? My place. I'll cook." Sophia almost laughed. He'd cook in his penthouse kitchen that cost more than most people's houses, with ingredients purchased thoughtlessly because money was just paper to him. He'd probably tell her about the restaurant buyout over wine, frame it as generosity, expect gratitude. She drove to her parents' house instead. Found Miguel in the garage working on the ancient Chevy he restored as stress relief. He took one look at her face and set down his wrench. "You knew." Sophia's voice was flat. "James bought the loans. You knew he was doing this." Miguel's shoulders sagged. "Mika, he wanted to help." "Help?" The word came out strangled. "Or buy me." Miguel explained. James had approached him 3 weeks ago, made the offer seem like business, restructuring the debt, better terms, a chance to save the restaurants. He'd been clear, Miguel insisted, that this was separate from the engagement. "He loves you, Sophia. He wanted to help your family because it mattered to you." Sophia felt hysterical laughter building. "And you let him. You let some rich boy think he could buy his way into our family, into my life." Rosa peered from inside, drawn by raised voices. She saw the papers in Sophia's hand, understood immediately. "Sophia, this isn't what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like." Sophia's vision blurred with angry tears. "This is why you pushed the marriage so hard. Not tradition, not family alliance. You saw a rich man who could solve all our problems." Rosa's eyes filled. "That's not fair." "Fair?" Sophia's voice broke. "Nothing about this is fair. You arranged my life like a business transaction, and when I tried to make the best of it, to actually find something real, it turns out it was just business. He was just securing his investment." She left them there, drove to James's office building in downtown Miami, rode the elevator to the 30th floor, past his assistant's protests that he was in a meeting. Sophia didn't care. She barged through the door without knocking. James stood at a conference table with 3 business partners, presentations spread across glass surface. He looked up, surprised, started to smile. The smile died when he saw her expression. "Sophia," she threw the folder onto the table, papers scattered. His business partners exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Want to explain this?" James's face went carefully neutral. He gestured to his partners. "Can we have the room?" They left quickly, sensing disaster. The door clicked shut. James turned to face her, and Sophia saw the moment he chose defense over apology. "You went through my things?" The accusation landed like a slap. Sophia's voice shook with rage. "You bought my family, like we're some charity case you can fix with your checkbook." "I was helping." "You didn't ask!" The shout echoed off glass walls. "You decided what I needed, what my family needed, and went behind my back like we're too stupid to handle our own problems." James's jaw tightened. "Your family was suffering. I had the means to help. What's wrong with that?" "Everything!" Sophia felt tears threatening, refused to let them fall. "Because you don't see me as an equal. You see me as a problem to solve.
Another acquisition for the Bradford Empire. I see you as someone I love. His voice rose to match hers. Someone whose family shouldn't lose everything because of pride. It's not pride, it's dignity. Sophia stepped closer, needing him to understand. My father came to this country with $50 and a dream. Everything he has, he earned, with sweat and sacrifice and 18-hour days. You just waltz in and write a check like it's nothing. James's face hardened. Money is nothing. It's just paper. What matters is that. Sophia jabbed a finger at his chest. That sentence, right there. That's why you'll never understand me. Money isn't nothing when you've had to fight for every dollar, when you've watched your parents sacrifice everything so you could have opportunities they never had. When you understand that how you earn something matters as much as having it. They stared at each other across an unbridgeable distance. James opened his mouth, closed it, tried again.
I don't understand what you want from me. Your family was going to lose the restaurants. I had the ability to prevent that. Isn't that what people who love each other do? Help each other? Sophia felt something crack in her chest.
Love isn't about solving someone's problems. It's about standing beside them while they solve their own. You don't want a partner, James. You want a project. She pulled the engagement ring off her finger, set it carefully on his desk.
The diamond caught light, sparkled indifferent to the destruction of everything they'd built.
I can't marry someone who doesn't respect me enough to let me fight my own battles. James's face went white. Sophia, please. No. She backed toward the door, needing distance before she broke completely. I can't be with someone who thinks love means controlling every situation. Someone who throws money at problems and expects gratitude. I'm not trying to control you. Yes, you are.
Sophia's voice went quiet, final.
And you don't even see it. That's what makes it worse. She walked out, left James standing in his glass-walled office 30 stories above a city he owned pieces of, holding an engagement ring that had never meant what either of them pretended. In the elevator, Sophia's phone exploded with texts. James calling, messaging, desperate. She turned it off, drove home on autopilot.
Sat in her small apartment, the space she'd rented with her own money, furnished with her own choices, built with her own hands, and let herself fall apart. The next 2 weeks passed in a fog. James tried everything. Flowers appeared daily. Sophia returned them. He called until she blocked his number, showed up at her apartment until she refused to open the door,
tried to reverse the restaurant transaction, but Miguel had already restructured it as a formal business loan with interest. Some pride salvaged from the wreckage. Catherine came to Miami, confronted James in a conversation Sophia only heard about secondhand through Rosa. The grandmother was disappointed, furious that her usually intelligent grandson had been so spectacularly stupid. Father Tom tried reaching out. Sophia ignored his calls too. She couldn't face the kindness, the assumption that reconciliation was possible or desirable. She threw herself into work, picked up every freelance project she could find, barely slept. Gabriella brought baby Isabella over one evening, forced her way inside, sat on Sophia's worn couch while Isabella gurgled and played with blocks. Tell me what happened. Sophia explained everything, the arrangement, the falling, the betrayal. Gabriella listened without judgment, then asked the question that cut deepest. So he tried to help your family, and you're mad? Sophia's defenses rose. He did it behind my back, without asking, because you would have said no. The accuracy stung. Sophia had been preparing exactly that response. Proud refusal, insistence on handling it herself, refusing to be indebted. Gabriella shifted Isabella to her other hip. You've been independent so long, you've forgotten how to let people in.
Maybe you're not mad he helped. Maybe you're scared. Scared of what?
Of needing someone. Of depending on anyone but yourself. Gabriella's voice gentled. Papa built everything himself because he had to. You don't have to repeat his struggle to honor it. It's okay to accept help. It doesn't make you weak. Sophia wanted to argue, but exhaustion was winning over pride. She'd spent 2 weeks being furious, and under the fury was just heartbreak. Missing James, missing the possibility of them. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted finally. Maybe it's not yours to fix alone. Gabriella stood, handed over Isabella for a hug. Maybe that's the whole point. After they left, Sophia sat holding the baby's warmth in memory, turning Gabriella's words over like stones in a river. She'd been so focused on maintaining independence that she'd built walls instead of boundaries, refused help instead of negotiating terms.
Madan did James see her as equal, while refusing to meet him halfway. But the money still burned. The manipulation, the secrecy, the assumption that he knew what was best, those weren't forgivable just because his intentions were good. Love without respect was just control in prettier packaging. Sophia had no idea how to reconcile these truths, so she did what she'd always done, buried herself in work and pretended the rest would solve itself eventually. It wouldn't, but she didn't know that yet. Week 9 arrived with the kind of spring morning that made Miami feel like someone's wishful thinking rather than actual geography. James Bradford sat in Edward Bradford's corner office, surrounded by glass and steel and the weight of 3 generations of empire building. His father's desk was mahogany, imported, worth more than most people's annual salaries. The view stretched across Brickell, capturing the financial district his family had helped construct. James had rehearsed this conversation a dozen times. None of the rehearsals had prepared him for the actual moment. I'm stepping down from the company. Edward looked up from his tablet, expression shifting from distraction to confusion to something approaching alarm. His reading glasses came off slowly, deliberately, the gesture of a man buying time to process the incomprehensible. You're what? James kept his spine straight, voice steady. I don't want to be your successor. I never did. The silence that followed felt seismic. Edward stood, moved to the window, looked out at the city he'd spent 40 years shaping. When he turned back, his face carried the particular disappointment fathers reserved for sons who rejected their carefully constructed futures. This is about the Martinez girl. Her name is Sophia. James heard the edge in his own voice, didn't soften it. And yes, this is partially about her. Mostly, Now it bounced off the clarity James had found in the wreckage of his relationship with Sophia. He'd spent 2 weeks trying to fix things with money, with gestures, with everything except actually changing. Catherine had finally cornered him, forced him to see what he'd been avoiding. Her words still echoed. You treated her like a charity case, like she couldn't handle her own family's problems. Love isn't about solving someone else's life. But Sophia doesn't need a provider. She needs a partner. And until you understand the difference, you'll keep losing her. The next morning, James had gone to his father's office with his resignation. Now he stood watching Edward process the destruction of carefully laid plans. His father's voice came out measured, controlled, dangerous. If you walk away from this company, you walk away from everything. The trust fund, the properties, the lifestyle you've enjoyed since birth. I know. James had already done the math, made the calculations. I've sold my penthouse, bought a 2-bedroom in Coral Gables with the proceeds, paid cash, no mortgage. Everything else goes into a charitable foundation in Sophia's name. I'll live on my teaching salary. Edward stared like his son had announced he was joining a cult. You've lost your mind. No. James felt something unlock in his chest, some pressure he'd been carrying since childhood finally releasing. I'm finding it, maybe for the first time. He left his father's office, walked out of the building he'd been groomed to run, and felt lighter than he had in years. The city looked different from street level, more real, less conquered. His phone showed a missed call from Miguel Martinez. James had been checking in weekly since Sophia had walked out, making sure the loan restructuring was proceeding correctly. Miguel had initially refused to accept it as anything but a gift, fought James hard on repayment terms. They'd finally settled on a proper business loan, market interest rate, 5-year repayment schedule, everything documented legally. Miguel's voice message was brief. James, thank you for last week's call. The bank approved our restructuring plan. We're going to make it. I wanted you to know. You did right by us. Sophia's too proud to say it, but her old man isn't. Thank you. James saved the message, listened to it 3 more times. Miguel's gratitude felt unearned, but the acknowledgement that he'd finally approached the situation correctly, as business rather than rescue, offered small comfort. The teaching position at Coral Gables Elementary came with orientation the following week. James attended professional development sessions alongside teachers who lived in worlds he was just beginning to understand. Budget constraints, supply shortages, the creative mathematics required to make $23 stretch across classroom needs. He took notes, asked questions, earned suspicious looks from veterans who'd seen wealthy volunteers before, knew the difference between commitment and performance. His assigned classroom was on the 2nd floor, overlooking a playground that had seen better decades. 24 desks, each one marked by the passage of countless children. Bulletin boards that needed updating, supply closets that needed organizing. James rolled up his sleeves and got to work, feeling purpose settle into his bones in ways Bradford Properties board meetings never had. He moved into his new apartment the 2nd week. 2 bedrooms, modest kitchen, living room that fit his furniture, but not his old lifestyle. The building sat in the neighborhood where people knew their neighbors, where kids played street soccer until sunset, where the sounds of different languages created evening symphony. James unpacked boxes and felt himself becoming someone new, someone he actually wanted to be. Sophia spent those same weeks in her own transformation, though hers looked more like controlled demolition than reconstruction. She took on 6 new design clients, worked 70-hour weeks, slept 4 hours a night when she slept at all. The work was good, maybe her best. Grief and anger had sharpened her creative edge, made her designs more daring. But exhaustion was winning. 3 weeks after walking out of James's office, Sophia found herself sitting in St. Patrick's Cathedral on a random Wednesday afternoon. The space was mostly empty, a few tourists, an elderly woman lighting candles, the quiet that churches achieve regardless of the chaos outside their walls. She hadn't come for confession, hadn't come for anything specific, but Father Tom appeared beside her anyway, settling into the pew with the comfortable presence of someone who'd spent 40 years reading people's needs. You look tired, Sophia. She managed a weak smile. Is that the pastoral way of saying I look terrible? His answering smile was kind. The pastoral way of saying you're carrying something heavy. The story spilled out. Not the arranged marriage part, some secrets stayed buried, but the rest. Falling for someone, discovering he'd been manipulating her family's finances, the betrayal and hurt, an impossible tangle of loving someone who couldn't see her as an equal. Father Tom listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment,
the kind of silence that felt expectant rather than empty. Are you angry he helped, or angry you needed help? The question landed like a blade between ribs. Sophia opened her mouth to protest, found no words that didn't prove his point. Both, she admitted finally. Pride is a sin, Sophia. His voice was gentle, fact without judgment. But so is refusing grace. Sometimes God sends us help in unexpected ways. The question isn't whether we deserved it or earned it. The question is whether we can accept it with gratitude, rather than resentment. Sophia felt tears threatening. He didn't ask. He just decided he knew what was best and went behind my back. Yes, that was wrong. Father Tom didn't soften it. But was your response to tell him how you needed to be loved? Or to punish him for not automatically knowing? The truth of it hurt. Sophia had expected James to intuitively understand her values, her history, her needs. But she'd never actually explained, just got angry when he failed to read her mind. I don't know if we can fix this. Maybe you can't. Father Tom's honesty was refreshing in its bluntness. Maybe some things break beyond repair, but maybe some things need to break completely before they can be built back stronger. The question you need to answer isn't whether James made mistakes. The question is whether you both can learn from them. Sophia left the cathedral with no clear answers, but marginally less certainty in her righteousness. The drive home took her past Bradford Properties' downtown tower, and she found herself wondering what James was doing. If he was thinking about her. If he'd moved on to someone who fit his world better. Someone like Lauren. Polished and proper and uncomplicated. The next Sunday, Rosa insisted Sophia come to family dinner. Non-negotiable, her mother's text read, with enough capital letters and exclamation points to suggest divine mandate. Sophia arrived expecting more wedding planning ambush or gentle pressure to reconcile with James. Instead, she found James standing in her parents' kitchen, helping Miguel prepare lechon asado. Sophia froze in the doorway. James looked up, saw her, went absolutely still. They stared at each other across the kitchen island, while Rosa bustled obliviously and Miguel pretended intense focus on seasoning. James broke the silence first. Your mother invited me. I can leave if you want. Every instinct screamed to turn around, walk out, maintain her anger as armor. But something about seeing him in her family's kitchen, wearing an apron that said, "Kiss the cook" in fading letters, hands covered in garlic and citrus marinade, it cracked something in her carefully maintained fury. Stay. The word came out smaller than intended. James's expression shifted through relief and uncertainty, landing on cautious hope. Dinner was excruciating. Both families present, everyone pretending normalcy, while Sophia and James navigated conversation like a minefield. But there were moments, small ones. James asking about her recent design projects with genuine interest. Sophia noticing his new watch, not the Rolex he'd worn before, but something simple and affordable. The way he helped clear dishes without being asked, comfortable in her family's rhythms. After dinner, Miguel suggested the garden. Sophia knew a setup when she saw one, but followed James outside anyway, drawn by masochistic curiosity about what he might say. They stood by the fountain where she'd slapped him weeks ago. The memory hung between them, impossible to ignore. James spoke first, words tumbling out, rushed and nervous. I got a job. Teaching 3rd grade at Coral Gables Elementary. I start in August. Sophia's brain struggled to process. What about the company? I walked away. From all of it. He met her eyes, and she saw something different there. Less certainty. More vulnerability. Sold the penthouse. Moved to a 2-bedroom apartment on Miracle Mile. Living on a teacher's salary now. Gave up my trust fund. The information landed like a series of small explosions. James, you didn't have to. Yes, I did. His voice carried conviction. Because you were right. I was using money as a shield, as a way to feel valuable while keeping people at arm's length.
I never had to earn anything, so I never learned to see the difference between helping and controlling. Sophia felt her defenses wavering. What changed?
Catherine. A rueful smile crossed his face. She told me love isn't about saving someone. It's about standing beside them while they save themselves. And I realized I'd been trying to be your hero instead of your partner. The words echoed Father Tom's wisdom, approached from a different angle, but landing in the same territory.
Sophia's throat tightened. I also restructured the loan with your father. Proper business terms, market rate interest, 5-year repayment schedule. He's proud of that, earning it back instead of accepting a gift. James's hands clenched, released. I'm sorry I didn't do that from the beginning. Sorry I didn't ask what you needed instead of assuming I knew. Sophia studied him, really looked. His clothes were different, still neat but not designer. His watch was a Timex, not a status symbol. The car she'd seen in the driveway was a practical Honda, not the Mercedes he'd nearly killed her with. Everything about him suggested real change rather than performance. Why? The question encompassed everything. Because I was terrified. The admission came out raw. Terrified that without the money, I'm not interesting, not worthy. That you'd realize I'm just some guy who's been hiding behind his last name his whole life. Sophia's breath caught. She recognized that fear, had felt versions of it herself. The terror that stripped of achievements and defenses, the core self, wasn't enough. James. His name came out softer than intended. I fell in love with you at a Starbucks, remember? Before I knew about the trust fund or the properties or any of it. I fell for the guy who held me in the rain and actually listened when I talked about design philosophy. His eyes searched hers, desperate and hopeful. Past tense? Fell? The question hung between them, loaded with everything they'd broken and might rebuild. Sophia felt tears burning, refused to let them fall. I'm terrified too, she whispered. Terrified I'm not enough for your world. That I'll always be the scholarship kid who doesn't know which fork to use. That your family will always see me as the girl who got lucky. James closed the distance between them, hands coming up to frame her face with devastating gentleness. You're everything. You always were. And I'm sorry it took losing you for me to understand that worth isn't measured in property values or stock portfolios. They stood there while evening painted the Miami sky in purples and golds. Two people who'd started as strangers, become enemies, pretended to be engaged, and somehow found something real in the wreckage of all their pretending. Sophia let herself lean into his touch just for a moment. I don't know if we can fix this. Maybe we can't fix it. James's thumbs brushed her cheekbones. Maybe we have to build something new instead. Something honest from the start. The words felt like possibility, like hope, like the beginning of something neither of them could control or predict. I'm still angry, Sophia admitted. You should be. I earned it. James's smile was small, sad, genuine. But maybe we can work through angry together instead of apart? Sophia thought about Father Tom's question, about Gabriella's wisdom, about the exhausting weight of maintaining fury when what she actually wanted was standing right in front of her.
looking at her like she mattered more than anything. "I have conditions." Relief flooded James's face. "Name them." "We do this as equals, true partners." Sophia pulled back enough to look him in the eye. "I contribute to our life, you contribute to our life. No saviors, no charity. Just two people building something together." "Deal." His voice was fervent. "Always. And you never ever make decisions about my family without talking to me first. Never, I swear. And we go slow, like actually slow. Not wedding planning while pretending to fall for each other slow." James laughed, the sound carrying genuine joy. "How slow?" Sophia pretended to consider. "Maybe we start with actual dating? Novel concept, I know." "Dating," James tested the word. "I can do dating. Dinner, movies, the terrifying prospect of meeting your friends who probably hate me. They definitely hate you. Fair." He was still holding her face, thumbs still brushing her skin in ways that made thinking difficult. "Can I kiss you? Or is that too fast?" Sophia answered by closing the distance herself. The kiss was different from their first one, less desperate, more intentional, a promise rather than a question. James kissed her back with the kind of care that suggested he understood how fragile this new beginning was. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Sophia rested her forehead against his. "This is going to be complicated." "Everything worth having is complicated." James's arms came around her, solid and warm. "Besides, we've already done complicated. We survived arranged marriage, fake engagement, and spectacular public breakup. Regular dating should be easy by comparison." Sophia laughed despite everything. "You're ridiculous. You love me anyway." Present tense, not past. Sophia let the truth settle. "Yeah, I do." They stood there in the garden while their families watched from the kitchen window, probably already planning the wedding they'd almost had. But this time felt different. This time, it was real. 3 months crawled by in the kind of slow building that actually let foundations set properly. James and Sophia dated. Actual dating, the kind that involved mini-golf and art galleries and terrible movies they mocked mercilessly. They went to counseling with Father Tom, worked through the ways they'd hurt each other, learned to communicate rather than assume. James started teaching, came home covered in glitter and marker stains, telling stories about his students with the kind of passion Sophia had never heard from him about real estate. She watched him become someone more himself, less polished and more genuine. Sophia's design studio grew. She hired an assistant, took on bigger clients, stopped accepting projects that required her to minimize her heritage. James was her biggest supporter, framing her best pieces for his classroom, telling everyone who'd listen about his incredibly talented girlfriend. They fought, real fights about real things, money, boundaries, the ways their different backgrounds created friction, but they fought fair, and they always came back to each other after. In June, James took her to Key West for a weekend. They walked on the beach where Hemingway had walked, ate conch fritters at tourist traps, watched sunset from Mallory Square surrounded by street performers and the smell of salt water. The second night, sitting on the beach after everyone else had left, James turned to her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I need to ask you something." Sophia's pulse quickened. "Okay." He didn't pull out a ring, didn't drop to one knee, just took her hands in his, held them carefully like they were precious. "Sophia Martinez, will you marry me?" His voice shook slightly. "Not because our families want it, not because it makes business sense, not for any reason except I can't imagine my life without you in it."
Because you make me want to be better. Because you challenge me to earn rather than assume. Because loving you has taught me what partnership actually means.
Sophia felt tears starting, didn't try to stop them. Are you sure? Really sure this time? I've never been more sure of anything. James's thumbs brushed her knuckles. I know we said slow. I know this probably seems fast. But I also know I want to spend the rest of my life proving I can be the partner you deserve. Sophia thought about the journey that had brought them here. The accident, the arranged marriage, the fake engagement, the spectacular breakup, the slow rebuilding. Nothing about their story was conventional or easy, but it was theirs. Yes. The word came out as half laugh, half sob. Yes, I'll marry you. James pulled her into his arms, kissed her with the kind of joy that made nearby tourists applaud. When they broke apart, he looked almost bashful. I don't have a ring yet. Wanted to ask first this time. Make sure we did everything in the right order. Sophia laughed, crying, happier than she'd known she could be. We've never done anything in the right order. Why start now? They picked the ring together the following week. Nothing ostentatious, just a simple band with a single diamond that caught light beautifully. James insisted Sophia's input on every detail. They were partners now, in the truest sense. The wedding took shape slowly, intentionally. Both families wanted to help, and this time Sophia let them. Compromise became the watchword. St. Patrick's Cathedral for the ceremony. Reception at Martinez Family Kitchen's original location. Catherine and Rosa planned together. Patricia and Miguel negotiated vendors, and somehow it worked. Early July arrived with the kind of heat that made Miami feel like a dare. Sophia stood in the bridal suite at St. Patrick's, wearing the ivory silk dress that had terrified her months ago. This time, looking at herself in the mirror, she saw not a stranger, but herself. Elevated, celebrated, ready. Rosa was crying already, mascara threatening despite waterproof promises. Gabriella held baby Isabella, who babbled, cheerfully oblivious to the significance. Catherine sat in a corner chair, looking elegant and satisfied, occasionally dabbing her eyes with that trademark handkerchief. A knock on the door. Miguel entered, froze when he saw his daughter. His weathered face crumpled with emotion he didn't try to hide. Mija, you're beautiful. Sophia crossed to him, careful not to wrinkle the dress. Are you sure about this, Papa? Really sure James is good enough? Miguel's smile was watery but genuine. He's good enough because he works to be good enough. That boy gave up everything to earn his place in your life. That's the kind of man who deserves my daughter. Music swelled from the sanctuary. The bridal party lined up. Gabriella, James's sister Olivia, who'd flown from Australia, Sophia's cousin Maria. They processed out, leaving Sophia alone with Miguel. He offered his arm. Ready? Sophia took it, felt the strength in her father's weathered hand. Completely. The cathedral doors opened, everyone rose. The organ began the processional, and Sophia walked toward her future on her father's arm. The aisle seemed endless, every step weighted with meaning. She saw James waiting at the altar, saw his face transform when he saw her. James was crying. Actually crying. No shame, no attempt to hide it. Just pure emotion painting his face as Sophia approached. She'd never loved him more than in that moment of complete vulnerability. Miguel placed her hand in James's at the altar, kissed her forehead. Take care of my little girl. James's voice was thick with emotion. With everything I am. Father Tom beamed at them both, the expression of a man who'd watched this relationship shatter and rebuild stronger.
His homily was brief, focused on the journey that had brought them here, on the grace of second chances, and the courage required to choose love repeatedly, rather than just once. Then came the vows. They'd written their own, agonized over every word, wanting to capture truth rather than prettiness. James went first, his voice steady despite the tears still tracking down his face. Sophia, I promise to ask before I assume, to listen before I act, to stand beside you rather than in front of you. You've taught me that worth comes from what we build together, not what I can provide alone. Thank you for loving me enough to challenge me. Thank you for being brave enough to give us a second chance. Sophia's own tears fell free now. She'd given up on protecting her makeup. James, I promise to let you in, even when it scares me. To accept help, knowing it doesn't diminish my strength. To trust that partnership doesn't mean losing myself. You've shown me that independence and interdependence can coexist. Thank you for doing the work to become the partner I needed. Thank you for choosing growth over pride. Father Tom smiled through his own tears. I now pronounce you husband and wife. James, you may kiss your bride. James cupped Sophia's face with infinite gentleness, kissed her like it was the first time and the last time, and every moment in between. The congregation erupted in applause, but Sophia barely heard it. All that existed was James's arms around her, his heart beating against hers, the future spreading before them like sunrise. They walked back down the aisle as Mr. and Mrs. Bradford, smiling so hard Sophia's face hurt. Outside the cathedral, Miguel's restaurant staff had organized a tunnel of raised wooden spoons, tribute to where their family's friendship had begun. Rice and flower petals rained down as they ran through, laughing and ducking. The reception at Martinez family kitchen was everything Sophia hadn't known she wanted. No formal ballroom, no crystal chandeliers, just her father's original restaurant, the place he'd built from nothing, transformed by Sophia's design eye and both families' love. String lights created magic overhead. Tables bore centerpieces Sophia had created, blending Cuban and American traditions in ways that honored both. The food was Miguel's, proper Cuban cuisine, no fusion compromises. Catherine declared the lechon the best she'd ever tasted. High praise from a Boston Brahmin. Edward Bradford, who'd barely spoken to James since the resignation, cornered his son near the mojito station. You're happy? Not quite approval, but maybe acceptance's first cousin. James's arm was around Sophia's waist, solid and sure. Happier than I knew I could be. Edward studied them both, then nodded slowly. Good. That's good. He paused, the confession clearly difficult. I was wrong. About teaching, about Sophia, about what makes a successful life. Your mother would be proud of the man you've become. James's eyes filled. His mother had died when he was 14. Breast cancer, fast and merciless. Her loss had shaped so much of his relationship with his father, both of them grieving separately instead of together. Thank you. James's voice was rough. That means more than you know. The father-daughter dance had Miguel crying openly while Sophia tried to comfort him and maintain her own composure. James danced with Catherine, with Rosa, with his sister, spreading joy democratically. When the DJ finally called the couple back to the floor, James pulled Sophia close. No regrets? His breath was warm against her ear. Only that we wasted time being stubborn. We had to break before we could build it right. James spun her gently. Besides, our kids will have a great story. Kids? Sophia pulled back to look at his face.
Plural? His grin was unrepentant. You're marrying a teacher. We're going to have a houseful. Sophia laughed, let herself imagine it. Children who carried both their heritages, who learned Spanish and English, who understood that worth came from character rather than bank accounts. Okay, she whispered against his chest. Okay. The evening blurred into happiness, toasts from Gabriella about baby Sophia being impossibly stubborn even as a child. James's college roommate sharing stories about James's terrible cooking experiments. Father Tom blessing the marriage with genuine warmth. Both families dancing together, barriers dissolved in celebration. When the party finally wound down near midnight, James and Sophia escaped to his car, the practical Honda that had replaced the Mercedes.
Rice and shaving cream decorated it, courtesy of Miguel's restaurant staff. Tin cans tied to the bumper. They drove through quiet streets toward their new home. A modest house they'd purchased together in both their names, each contributing what they could afford. 18 months later, Sophia stood in their kitchen on a Sunday morning, watching James attempt pancakes again. He'd gotten marginally better, though marginally was doing heavy lifting. Storm, their golden retriever puppy named for the accident that had brought them together, danced around James's feet, begging for scraps. Their home was small, but theirs. Sophia's design work decorated the walls, pieces clients had commissioned, pieces she'd created for love rather than money. James's third-grade student's artwork covered the refrigerator in a riot of primary colors and enthusiastic spelling errors. Sophia felt the weight of the small box in her pocket, the secret she'd been carrying for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. Watching James burn pancakes while singing off-key to Spanish pop radio seemed as right as anything. She pulled out the box, set it on the counter near his elbow. James glanced down, confused, picked it up. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, tiny booties. His hand froze. The spatula clattered against the pan. He turned to look at Sophia with an expression that cycled through confusion to understanding to pure incandescent joy in seconds. Are you? Sophia nodded, smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. 8 weeks. I found out at my checkup Tuesday. James crossed the kitchen in 2 strides, lifted her off her feet, spun her around while Storm barked excitedly. When he set her down, his hands were shaking as they moved to rest gently against her still flat stomach. We're having a baby? We're having a baby. James kissed her with a mix of tenderness and awe that made Sophia's heart hurt in the best way. Storm whined for attention. The pancakes burned, sending smoke toward the ceiling. Neither of them cared. I love you. James's voice broke with emotion. I love you so much. I love you too. Sophia held his face between her hands. Now and always. The smoke alarm started shrieking. They both jumped, laughing. James rushed to rescue the pancakes. Too late. They were carbon. Sophia opened windows while Storm barked at the alarm, and the chaos of their small kitchen felt perfect in ways their early pretend engagement in his penthouse never had. Sunday dinner at Martinez's family kitchen brought the announcement to both families. Catherine cried, Rosa cried, Patricia cried. Miguel pulled James aside for a long hug, whispering something that made James's eyes go suspiciously bright. Edward actually smiled, the genuine kind, rather than his business smile. Gabriella cornered Sophia near the kitchen. I told you letting people in didn't make you weak. Sophia hugged her sister. You were right. About everything. The dinner celebration stretched into evening, both families together, loud and loving and exactly what Sophia had needed without knowing she needed it. She watched James across the room, deep in conversation with Father Tom about baptism logistics, already planning their child's future with the kind of care that characterized everything he did now. Later, driving home through Miami streets Sophia had known her whole life, James took the long route, ended up on I-95, pulling onto the shoulder near the spot where they'd met. Construction had changed some things, but the basic geography remained. They got out, stood on the grass where Sophia had landed after throwing herself backward, where James had stumbled from his Mercedes, terrified he'd killed someone, where their story had begun with rain and fear and the desperate human need for connection. "Can you believe we met here?" James's arm was around her waist, protective even in memory of that moment. Sophia leaned into him, watching traffic roar past. "Best accident of my life." "Second best." She looked up at him, confused. "Second?" James's free hand moved to rest against her stomach, gentle and reverent. "The first was falling in love with you. The second was nearly running you over to make it happen." Sophia laughed, the sound carrying over highway noise. "You're ridiculous." "You love me anyway." "Yeah." She turned in his arms, looked up at the man who'd nearly killed her, who'd betrayed her, who'd worked to earn her trust back through real change rather than grand gestures. "I really do." The rain started then, light Miami drizzle that might become a storm or might just be the evening's mood. They stood there getting wet while traffic rushed past, two people who'd taken the longest possible route from strangers to partners. Sophia thought about the woman she'd been 18 months ago. Struggling designer, proud to a fault, determined to need no one. She thought about the woman she was now, still independent, still strong, but open to partnership in ways that had seemed impossible before. "What are you thinking about?" James's voice was soft against her hair. "That sometimes the best things happen when you stop planning and start living." "Very wise." He kissed the top of her head. "Though I'm pretty sure you stole that from a fortune cookie." Sophia elbowed him gently. "Maybe, but it's still true." They got back in the car, drove to their small house in Coral Gables. Storm greeted them at the door with enthusiastic wiggling. James made tea while Sophia changed into comfortable clothes. They settled on the couch with Storm between them, their little family complete and expanding. Outside, the Miami rain fell steady and soft, washing the day clean. Sophia rested her hand on her stomach, imagining the life growing there. A child who would carry both their stories, both their strengths, both their hard-won wisdom about the difference between independence and isolation. James's hand covered hers, warm and steady. They sat in comfortable silence while rain whispered against windows and Storm snored contentedly between them. No elaborate plans, no predetermined futures. Just two people who'd crashed into each other, literally and metaphorically, and somehow built something real from the wreckage. Sophia looked around their small living room. Photos from their actual wedding, not the staged one they'd almost had. James's teaching awards, her design pieces, the life they'd constructed together, brick by careful brick. She thought about Father Tom's words months ago. Maybe some things need to break completely before they can be built back stronger. They'd broken. Spectacularly, painfully broken. And in the rebuilding, they created something neither could have designed alone. Something honest and difficult, and absolutely worth fighting for. James shifted beside her, pulling her closer. "Happy?" Sophia considered the question. Her small house, her growing business, her husband who smelled like chalk dust and chose her every single day. The baby growing inside her, the families who'd tried to arrange their marriage and ended up getting exactly what they wanted through the longest possible route. "Yes." The word contained everything, all the fear and fight and eventual grace that had brought them here. Completely happy. Outside, the rain continued falling. Inside, Sophia Martinez Bradford rested against her husband's shoulder and let herself believe in the impossible thing they'd built together. Love earned rather than arranged. Partnership chosen rather than assigned. A future they'd construct, one honest decision at a time. The story that had started with a collision on a rain-soaked highway had led here, to this moment, to this small, perfect happiness. And Sophia couldn't imagine her life any other way.